Who's not flying under the radar nationally? That's the SEC, because there's a lot of discussion about should SEC move to 9 conference games? What's the college football playoff format going to look like? Well, Brian Kelly of LSU made a big statement down there in Destin, Florida. We're going to discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jay, the discussion around the college football playoff format, a lot of it centers on the fact that the SEC only plays 8 conference games as opposed to 9 conference games like the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC. And yet, as much as everybody seems to think that the SEC is eventually going to budge on this, you listen to the coaches talk, the guys that are making the big money at these schools, and they don't seem to have a whole lot of interest in moving to 9 conference games. One thing that Brian Kelly said, though, is fascinating. He wants the Big 10. He's saying, like, let's create a scheduling agreement with the Big 10 to where we play one of them every year, and then we play 2 other non-conference games. That'll be fascinating. There's reports out there from Ross Dellinger that there's some interest there, but again, the Big 10 wants the SEC to go to 9 conference games to match what they do.
I don't get that. To me, that just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, the Big 10 can be at 9, which we totally understand why they're at 9. They've got like 30 teams in their conference, so it totally checks out that they need to find a reason to get a lot of people playing against each other, because they've got a lot of teams that's going to like that's not going to interlap with each other, and they're going to end up with similar records. So you got to have some sort of odd number to help with being able to say, oh, you have more conference wins in comparison to this guy. We totally understand that. SEC really doesn't have that problem. You know, we're pretty solid over here when it comes to that. But I don't get why the Big Ten wants to do that. While at the same time, shout out to the long-standing members of the SEC in Oklahoma and Texas who have already been playing Big Ten teams, year after year. You know, Texas travels to Ohio State, and Ohio State will come back. They did a Michigan home and home. They got a Michigan home and home basically set up. Oklahoma's got Michigan coming to town. They'll go to Michigan, and then Texas and Michigan, and then Oklahoma's played Ohio State. Look, we have been the trendsetters for the conference already, which I love. Yeah. That's going to make so many people mad, and I have no problem with. I actually don't care. Y'all can be upset. I think it's fun and funny because Oklahoma and Texas have, especially Oklahoma, if there's one thing you can say about the Sooners, and I'll give it to Texas as well, is that neither have ever been afraid about going up against bigger competition in home and home series. Like Oklahoma, like Texas had Alabama set, and Oklahoma was going to play Georgia, but the SEC had them scrap that because the reciprocative game was going to be so far in the future that it was going to mess up with some of the scheduling stuff, and they wanted to make sure that Georgia got their share of the pie with Oklahoma going to town. So totally understand that. But both teams have always been willing to play against a lot of other tough teams. LSU's similar too. They're willing to do it neutral site. I ain't seen them do home and home series yet, and that's what we need. Give me some home and home. Give me some campus stuff. Like, I enjoy neutral sites for, the holiday weekend because it's a long weekend. It gets people, a vacation thing to do for Labor Day and all of that. Totally understand it. But, John, 100%. I want campus games. Give me that. I want more campus games. But the SEC going to 9 in order to fulfill that, the request of the Big Ten, shout out to Paul Sankey. He said this the best way of anybody. He said, why does the SEC need to keep giving these compromises? Maybe the compromises need to come out of other people instead of the Southeastern Conference. Because it feels like everybody's like, well, we want you to do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, without saying what they're going to actually compromise on their end. The Big Ten playing the SEC and non-cons would do nothing but make everybody money. Those are the games that we want to see. Now, granted, the question is who's going to play who, and there's always those possibilities that you'll see. Somebody posted this in the Georgia message board, because Message Board's geniuses over on Twitter decided to repost it. Thought it was hilarious. That you'll see Tennessee play Michigan. You'll see Georgia play against Ohio State, Alabama's going to get Purdue. Somebody else is going to get like, I don't know, your Rutgers.
Oklahoma gets Penn State.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what you'll probably see.
Yeah.
And it's a funny joke on their part, while at the same time, it's kind of truthful. I want to know who these bottom teams are going to play. To me, if you do it right, top teams play top teams, middle teams play middle teams, bottom teams play bottom teams, and you schedule it annually based upon results.
Yeah.
That would make it more fun. That's something the fans would be excited about. It's similar to NFL scheduling, and I really hope we go to that direction here in the future.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes the most sense. The other thing that makes the most sense is the SEC just doing what they want to do. Yeah, why would they want to do it the same way as everybody else? They've created a situation where they're one of the most powerful conferences in college football doing it their way. Greg Sankey has created this situation in which the SEC is what everybody's looking to for change. And I get you want everybody to be at 9 conference games, but there's a reality here that not every conference is created equal. And we kind of have to move past this idea that the SEC and the Big Ten are the same. They're not. Or that the SEC and the Big 12 are the same. They're not. It's not the same. Nope. You look at what the teams that got left out of the playoff, what they lost, those 3 losses that they had. You look at South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss, those losses were in conference play. So do you need those teams to have another conference game? No, the strength of schedule is already pretty high. You don't have to have a stronger schedule if you're the SEC to create equity in scheduling. No, you don't need that. And like you mentioned, these teams are already playing tough non-conference. Oklahoma, last year they had, the Houston game? Like, listen, I get it's just Houston, but Houston's a Big 12 team. They'll play SMU in a few years. They'll play Nebraska in a few years. They've got Clemson on the schedule down the road. So it's not like these teams are shying away from games. And honestly, if you make them add a 9th conference game, there's a really good chance they are going to start shying away from those bigger non-conference games.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley and USC are trying to do it every single year. They're trying to get games canceled, get games moved because they play 9 conference games and they don't want the smoke. Oklahoma will take the smoke. They want Nebraska. They want Clemson. They want to play these games. But if you look across the conference, will they continue to do those games if they have to have a 9th conference game? I don't know if that's going to be the case. They will schedule a P4 game, but it might be Rutgers or Northwestern or Cal or pick a random ACC, Maryland. Like, it's not going to be Clemson or Ohio State or Virginia Tech or Texas Tech, a big 12 team. They're going to start shying away from some of those things if that's what it's going to take to have schedule equity. Is you're not going to Ohio State. I'm sorry, you're not going to get to play Texas. Then you're not going to get to play Georgia in non-con. USC, you're not going to get to play LSU in non-con. That's all going to change. So be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you're asking for.
Yes, for a lot.
Because I think Brian Kelly is actually onto something here. It's like, leave it at 8. We'll just schedule the Big Ten every year. And you know what, Big Ten, why do you need to be at 9 conference games? You can change. You can go back to 8 conference games, and you can get the same benefit that SEC has.
Actually, they probably need to stay at 9 because if you really think about it, with the way that they're so top heavy, you probably, if you keep it at 9 and add an SEC game, guess what? People want to ask questions. The biggest question last year was Indiana. And I mean, I totally understand why people were, pushing back at Indiana being a viable candidate to make the playoffs, but they did a decent job of playing against Notre Dame. It was 20-15. So the game wasn't a blowout. They just didn't control much of anything whatsoever. While at the same time, you add them an SEC game in there and they get that win. That 11-1 record looks a heck of a lot better. They didn't play a bunch of scrubs, but I mean, they did have Washington, who was solid. They, not good, but not great. They did have Michigan, who was good, not great. Michigan did beat Alabama in the bowl game very badly, unfortunately. That's 2 years in a row. They had the Ohio State game on the road, which is tough for anybody. We'll see if Texas can, overcome that. But they had a decent set of scheduled games on there. It's just people weren't impressed with who they played. And even though they won them most of them by blowout. You give them an SEC game, and that gets them 10 out of their 12 being, not only a conference, but a tough opponent on the road. People may respect them more. And same thing on the SEC side. Maybe if, Alabama didn't play Mercer, which, I don't mind the FCS game. I think every team deserves to have 2 cupcakes on their schedule, not only to help fund those schools' athletic programs so that those programs can still exist, but it also gives you those warm-up games. It's basically preseason football, something you don't get in college.
Right.
That's the value of it. So I don't see why people get so upset about it. It's just when you have 4 of them on your schedule and it's like, okay, that's absurd. We need to get past that. 2, no more. Then force everybody to play 10 at minimum P4 opponents. We'll be in good spots.
Right. If you want to tell me the SEC is going to stay at 8 conference games, but they're going to have 2 Power 4 opponents, that should satisfy everybody, right? Like that should be more than enough, because that's what you're asking. That's really what you're asking for, Big Ten, is you just want them to have 2 Power 4 opponents. Because you look at Ohio State or Penn State's schedule, all right, a team that everybody thinks is going to be one of the favorites in college football. Their non-conference, Nevada, FIU, Villanova. Like, who is getting excited about any of those games? Nobody. Okay, you play Oregon, great. That's a really solid matchup. UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, and then obviously the Ohio State game's huge. Then you have Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers. Like, there's 2 games on Penn State's schedule that I'm getting excited for. Oregon and Ohio State. That's really it. They don't really have this schedule that's like, oh my gosh, that's a meat grinder for Penn State. No, it's not. And they're going to be a playoff team at the end of the year because their schedule is pretty cheeks. I'm sorry. It just is. But then you want to talk about what the SEC teams are playing on their schedules, and to me, it just doesn't hold water. If you're talking the SEC doesn't have the same scheduling requirements, I'm sorry, you're missing me with that, because that Penn State schedule is not great. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. You can follow me at John9Williams and read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. Lots of college softball happening over there right now, so go check it out. Ranked all of the uniforms in the Women's College World Series. So that was kind of fun. Hopefully you guys didn't take too much offense to that. But make sure you follow the show at Locked On Sooners wherever you like to do your social media stuff. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Boomer
Sooner. Yeah, somebody's going to fight you over those jerseys.
Oh, yeah,
just
totally.
What's going to happen.
Absolutely.
But it's okay.
Yep.
It's okay.
They'll hate me. It's fine.
Fight them.